Archaeology has a lot to contribute to the future making of this city. We have to think about, as we design the city of the future, what we want to keep for future generations and what we want to teach them about the past of the city. The story of Detroit is not a story that lies in ruins. The story of Detroit is a story that encapsulates millennia of human activity, and we see that activity recorded in the soil deposits that are under our feet when we walk around the city, in our backyards, underneath the buildings that we visit on an everyday basis. Detroit's geology is really interesting, and the way in which its archaeological and geological record is formed is kind of a marriage between geological formation processes. So you can see the last glacial episodes about 10,000 years ago at the lowest levels of the excavation units we dig. So about 1 meter down or 3 feet down, you start to see a silty, sandy soil. But on top of that glacial soil, we have a very thick and dense deposit across all of Detroit of a clay, a type of clay. It's usually gray, it's very heavy, it's very dense. And on top of that clay, we have anthropogenic soil, so soil that's been modified by humans. Organic materials, artifacts, trash have been introduced into it over time, fertilizer. So this is a very active layer. We call this an anthrosol. The anthrosol that we see in Detroit's soil profiles and in its archaeological records is almost exclusively the remnants of post-European contact. The Native Americans definitely left a signature on the landscape and soil profiles in Detroit, but when the Europeans came in the 18th century, they introduced heavy industry and rapid landscape transformations to the city. Between 1850 and 1950, Detroit's population doubled every decade. Detroit is still changing rapidly, but we're at a critical junction now because the types of change we're seeing don't always recognize the layers of history that came before. If we really want an inclusive and democratic vision of Detroit that embraces its history and its communities, it's really imperative that we recognize the archaeological and cultural heritage of the city. A lot of the sites that archaeologists have excavated in Detroit over the past 60 years speak to the working class communities of Detroit who don't often appear in historical narratives of the city. These artifacts tell us about what people were doing on an everyday basis, what they were eating, what they were playing with, what they were consuming, what they did in their leisure time, and how they built their houses. Archaeology actually provides a tangible connection to pasts. So you can think of archaeology and the information it provides about the past as part of Detroit's present day and future ecosystem. You have people today in the present interacting with soils and archaeological remains of the past. Those remains tell stories of people and communities that are often left out of the city's narratives. It presences the past in an important way that can empower and mobilize communities so that they can rally around these stories and continue to define themselves in ways that recognize the deep time and deep history that archaeology brings into the equation.